Module 2, Fractions and Decimals. This is section 2.14, More work with perimeter and area. When you're asked to find the perimeter of an object, all you're going to do is add up all the sides. You're going to add up the rim of the figure. If you're talking about a rectangle, rectangles have sides that are congruent. Opposite sides are the same length. So if this side is a 4, the side opposite is also a 4. If this side is a 10, the side above it is also a 10. Then all I will do is add up those sides. 4 plus 4 plus 10 plus 10. And my perimeter would be a 28. Since I'm adding up 2 of one side and 2 of another, we can shorten that formula to be the perimeter is equal to 2L, 2 times L, 2 times the length, plus 2W, which is 2 times the width. If I have a rectangle that has a length of 8 and a width of 5, I know if this side is a 5, this side is also a 5. And if this side is 8, this side is also an 8. So my perimeter is 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. The length is an 8 and the width is a 5. 2 times 8 is 16 and 2 times 5 is 10. So my perimeter is 26 inches. If you're talking about a square is a special type of rectangle where all the sides are the same length. So if you know that one side is any given number, all the other sides have to be the exact same length. So instead of saying side plus side plus side plus side, since they're all 4 the same, we can say the perimeter of a square is 4S. With a triangle, they may or may not have sides that are the same length. And since I only have 3 sides, I'll just add up the 3 sides, A plus B plus C. If I have a triangle that is 4 meters, 10 meters, and 9 meters, my perimeter would be 4 plus 10 plus 9. And the perimeter of this triangle is 23 meters. Sometimes they give you a figure and not all of the sides are labeled, and it's not a normal figure. It's not a rectangle or a square. You can see I have a 6 here, and I have a 30 here. Then these two are both 13, but I don't have anything here, and I don't have anything here. If you think about extending this side, and then that top piece, then I would have a rectangle. And you have a couple of choices. If this whole side is 13, but I push this in 6 inches, in order for me to finish this section here, I would need another 7 inches. So this piece right here would need to be 7. I know it doesn't look like it's longer than the other side. These figures are rarely drawn to scale. This whole piece here is 30. If this piece has come in 13, if I was going to finish this piece off over here, that would be the same as if I finished this piece off underneath it. And so that would need to be 17 so that I can get up to the whole piece. Now I can add up all the sides. I have 7 plus 17 plus 6 plus 13 plus another 13 plus 30. This is 24 plus another 6 is 30. 13 plus 13 is 26, and I'll add on this 30. 30 plus 26 is 56, plus 30 more gives me a perimeter of 86 inches. You can also think about carving up this figure in different ways. So you could also have finished it this way. Or you also could have just said, well, if I finish this, my perimeter would still be the same, right? 30 plus 30 plus 13 plus 13, which is what I had right here. If I want to find the perimeter of a circle, we don't call it a perimeter, we call it a circumference, and it has a little bit of a weird formula. You're going to take either the radius, which is halfway across the circle through the center, or the diameter, and you're going to multiply those by pi. You can say 2 times pi times r, or more commonly we just say pi times d, pi times the diameter. Pi is the number of times a diameter will wrap around the edge of the circle, the circumference of the circle, regardless of the size of the circle. It doesn't matter how big or how small, it's always going to take about 3.14 diameters to work around. Sometimes they say leave your circumference in terms of pi, which means they just want their answer in a number times pi. So for example, they may want it written as 2 pi. Sometimes they say round to the nearest tenth or hundredths, and when you do that and they want it rounded, you're going to swap out that pi for a 3.14. In this example, they want to find the circumference, and they're given the radius because I'm halfway through. Well, a radius is half of a diameter, or I need 2 radii to get 1 diameter. So if my radius is 10, then my diameter is a 20. Circumference is pi times the diameter. So if I wanted this circumference in exact form, or terms of pi, I would say it's 20 pi. If I wanted it estimated, or rounded to the nearest tenth, I would say 3.14 times 20. My first row would all be zeros, and I would multiply by the 2. I would need to move in 2 spots because I have 2 decimal points here. And if I round to the hundredths, well, it's already a 0, so I'm really quite done. My estimate would be 62.8. Let's look at area. If I want to find the area of a figure, it's basically length times width. Sometimes we call it by some different names, like with a rectangle we say side by side. And for a parallelogram we'll say base times height. But that's because my height is on the inside and not on the outside. If you have a figure that's got a little slant, we use base times height, like we do with our triangle. Now you can see with my triangle, I basically have half of a parallelogram. So my area for a triangle is only 1/2 the base times the height. A little more complicated is a trapezoid. It's basically a rectangle with 2 triangles attached on each side. And that area is 1/2 times, and then you're going to add the base 1 and base 2, we usually call it, these 2 parts up here that are parallel, and then you're going to multiply it by the height, which will be on the inside. Don't do anything with the slanty sides. If I want to find the area of the triangle is 1/2 the base times the height. It doesn't matter who's the base and who's the height, because I could just flip this guy this way, and suddenly my base would be the 5 and the height would be the 6. So since I can just rotate it however I want, I can make whatever piece I want to be the base and the height. I'll say 1/2 times 6 times 5. Well, 1/2 of 6 is 3, and 3 times 5 is 15. And so my area here is 15 yards squared. We say squared because we're talking about how many little squares we can carve into here. And we'll be able to count those up. If I want to find the area for a parallelogram, it's again base times height. Base times height is just multiplication. And so once again, it doesn't really matter who's the base and who's the height, because multiplication can be done in any order. We do have a mixed number here that I'm not going to be able to work with, so I'm going to have to change that to an improper fraction. Remember, you keep the denominator the same, multiply the denominator by the whole number, and then add the numerator. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 1 is 21. And when I have a fraction times a whole number, I put an invisible 1 underneath, and now I'll multiply straight across. 7 times 21 is 147, and 1 times 4 is 4. And you can leave it as that, or you can divide 147 divided by 4 for a 36.75, and this is going to be feet squared. Anytime you are finding the area, the units will be squared. Anytime you find perimeter, you just leave them in linear feet or inches, so not squared, not to any power. Let's look at our trapezoid. The area for a trapezoid is 1/2 times base 1 plus base 2 times the height. Sometimes you'll see the height formula, the height wedged in between the 1/2 and the times the base 1 and base 2. So I have 1/2. My height is that number on the inside. That's a 4. And then I have base 1 and base 2. Those are our flat parts, our not slanty parts. And it doesn't matter who's 1 and who's 2. We're just going to go ahead and add them. So I have 1/2 times 14 times 4. 1/2 of 14 is 7. Times 4 is 28. And so my area for this is 28 meters squared. We don't have a fancy name for area of a circle. It's still just area. To find the area of the circle, it's pi times r squared. Make sure you're using r this time. For circumference, you can use pi times d or pi times 2r, so you can use the radius or the diameter. But for area, you need to use the radius. I want to find the area of the circle that has a radius of 2. And the radius needs to get squared and then multiplied times pi. Pi times r squared. If I want an exact form of this area, that would be 4 pi. If I wanted to estimate it using 3.14, I would say pi, which is 3.14, times the 4. I would multiply, and then when I move this over 2 spots, it would be approximately 12.56 centimeters squared. And that's how you find area and perimeter for squares, rectangles, trapezoids, and circles.